Around 5,000 years ago, a rich and powerful nation called the Kingdom of Kush, also referred to as ancient Nubia, was a center of culture and military might in Africa. Ancient Nubia had a wealth of natural resources such as gold, ivory, copper, frankincense, and ebony, but they also produced and traded a variety of goods such as pottery. The Nubians formed the foundation of the Proto-Dravidians, Proto-Elamites, Proto-Mandi speakers, and West Atlantic people. Their bowmen warriors were known and feared by those who saw them in battles. Ancient Nubia's lands are now part of modern Egypt and Sudan. Its geographic position meant that much of ancient Nubia's development is connected to that of ancient Egypt. In fact, Egypt ruled much of Nubia between 2000 BC and 1000 BC. But when Egypt collapsed into civil war, Nubian kings ruled Egypt from around 800 BC to 700 BC. The Nubians are believed to be the first human race on earth, and most of their customs and traditions were adopted by the ancient Egyptians. To the Greeks, they were known as Ethiopians, and Nubia as the land of Punt, the land of gods. Nubians are the people of northern Sudan and southern Egypt, with a history and tradition which can be traced to the dawn of civilization. The Nubian first settled along the banks of the Nile from Aswan. Along this great river they developed one of the oldest and greatest civilizations in Africa. Until they lost their last kingdom, Christian Nubia, only 5 centuries back, the Nubians remained as the main rivals to the other great African civilization of Egypt. Nubia is the homeland of Africa's earliest black culture, with a history which can be traced from 3800 BC onward through Nubian monuments and artifacts, as well as written records from Egypt and Rome. In antiquity, Nubia was a land of great natural wealth, of gold, mines, ebony, ivory, and incense, which was always prized by their neighbors. Although Sudan had remained the main homeland of Nubians through their long history, many of their descendants is today's Egypt, but still the majority of Nubians of today are Sudanese. With only a population of slightly above 300,000, they are a minority in both countries. Nevertheless, being of African descent, they resemble other Sudanese people more than Egyptians. Nubians in both Sudan and Egypt have suffered a lot from intentional overlooking to their history and culture, as well as displacement, relocation due to flooding and inundation of their homeland by dams constructed south of Egypt. In the 1930s, a large proportion of the Nubian villages along the Nile were totally submerged. Some Nubians decided to move north into Egypt. The majority, however, chose to stay in their doomed country and rebuilt their houses on higher ground above the new shoreline. During this century, the Nubian homeland had been inundated 3 times. However, the 1960 Nubian exodus is the most painful to all Nubians. Following the construction of Aswan High Dam in 1960, the land of Nubia between Aswan in Egypt and the Fourth Cataract in Sudan was the subject of flooding and inundation. Nubians were displaced and relocated in other areas in both Sudan and Egypt. Great Nubian monuments and historical sites were drowned and lost for good. The monuments of Nubia would have ultimately been lost to the depths of the lake had it not been for the joint effort of 50 countries providing financial contributions and expertise in an effort to save the monuments. Wherever feasible, monuments were dismantled or cut from the rock and reassembled at new sites in Egypt and Sudan. Cemeteries and structures that could not be moved were excavated and recorded in as much detail as possible. The Nubians lost their ancient homeland in the 1960s, but their culture and heritage remain. The influx of Arabs to Egypt and Sudan had contributed to the suppression of the Nubian identity following the collapse of the last Nubian kingdom in 1900. A major part of the Nubian population were totally Arabized or claimed to be Arabs. Jaline, the majority of northern Sudanese, and some Donglawis in Sudan, Kanus and Korasakos in Egypt. However, all Nubians were converted to Islam, and Arabic language became their main media of communication in addition to their indigenous Old Nubian language. The unique characteristic of Nubian is shown in their culture, dress, dances, tradition, and music, as well as their language, which is the most common feature of all Nubians.